I'm Sarah with Sewing with Sarah and with the Fabric Fairy, and I'm excited to welcome you into the Fabric Fairy group's swimsuit sew-along this week. Now, I've intentionally left this sew-along open-ended, so you can use this opportunity to sew anything from a swim cover-up to a bikini to a one-piece to board shorts, even a swim bag if that's what you want to do. So anything that has to do with time at the beach or at the pool is totally welcome here this week. I am going to be taking the opportunity to share with you some tips and tricks that I've learned sewing swimwear for the past 5 years or so, and just kind of sharing those with you. Today, before we get started on our patterns, I wanted to take some time to go over the notions and the different types of swimwear fabrics and some things that you might have questions about. My hope is that we have a lot of new folks joining us for this sew-along, and so hopefully I can provide some information that might be new to you. And for those of you that are more experienced, I'd love to learn from you, and maybe I can share something that you haven't thought of or tried yet as well. So, like I said, this is open-ended. Today, I'm going to be covering, the specific things that you might want to have on hand. And, there is still time to order. Our discount code is still active, so you can look for that in the group, and I'll put it in this post when I post this video. So you can definitely use that to order anything you might not have. And then things that the Fabric Fairy doesn't carry, I'll be sharing where you might want to find those. So the first thing that I want to talk about when we talk about swim fabrics is just the swim fabric itself, right? So there are different types of swim fabrics. There are nylon swim fabrics and there are polyester swim fabrics. So when you're choosing a swim fabric, the type of material that goes into that fabric may be a consideration for you, and Fabric Fairy carries both, and I've made swimsuits out of both with great success. So no matter what you choose, I think you're going to end up with a good swimsuit. But there are some differences, and have some to show you. The other thing that could be different between swim fabrics is you might want to be aware of is how opaque they are. Some are thinner than others, might shine through, so you may want to hold it up to the light, put your hand behind it, and see, is this something that I'm going to need to add a lining to in certain areas, or is it going to be totally opaque the way that it is? Some swim patterns have you using a self lining, so you may be, or making it reversible, so that kind of adds a layer of opacity in and of itself, but that's something to consider as well. You definitely want to make sure that your swim fabric has adequate stretch, so your pattern should give you a stretch percentage, and when they give you a stretch percentage, usually they're talking about, for swim especially because it's so form-fitting, 4-way stretch. So what that means is that you're going to have a stretch that goes this way, and then you're going to have a stretch that goes that way. So 2 ways each side, for a total of 4. So most swim fabrics or most swim patterns are going to want you to have like at least 60 or 70% stretch. That's going to make it comfortable, form-fitting. You really don't want to skimp on that vertical stretch, because especially like something like a one-piece suit is going to be pulled vertically as well as horizontally across your body. So keep in mind the stretch. Fabric Fairy does a great job of listing all the stretch on their swim fabrics. You also want to think about the type of lining. So I'll take some time today to kind of walk you through the different types of lining that the Fabric Fairy covers, and you want to take that into consideration about which type of lining you want to use. And then I'll talk, after I'm done with that, a little bit about the notions and things that hopefully you have on hand, but if you don't, would be handy to go out and use. So, one more thing about swim fabrics, some of them have an SPF rating. So we are here in Florida for the winter, for example. If you don't notice, we live in an RV, we travel the country full time. So that is why my surroundings are what they are. But the swim fabrics often have like an SPF rating, and I really like finding those in particular because my kids spend so much time in the sun, and often they'll go swimming, they'll get out, they'll dry, and especially my 6-year-old daughter will just wear that swimsuit basically until I make her take it off. She would sleep in it if she could. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Elastic is another big thing with swimwear. Pretty much all swim patterns are going to require some elastic unless they're using self fabric bands, but every one I've really looked at requires elastic. So there are different types of swim elastic, and we'll be covering those. So let's get started talking about swim fabrics. So I have two examples here. Fabric Fairy carries polyester spandex swim, and they carry nylon spandex swim. And these are the two general types of swimwear fabrics that you'll find both in ready-to-wear suits. If you look at the tag, some will say polyester spandex, some will say nylon spandex. And those are, there's a little bit of difference between them. Definitely, if there's a print that you're in love, I will say that either one of these fabrics will work well. So go with what you love. But just some kind of general differences. Nylon spandex swim fabrics tend to absorb more water than polyester swim fabrics. So they dry a little bit more slowly. So that's something to keep in mind. They're still all going to dry pretty quickly depending on your weather. So that's something to keep in mind. Nylon tends to be a little bit stretchier. So nylon spandex swim can be really good for really active water sports. So if you're out there wakeboarding, paddleboarding, not just kind of lounging by the pool, but really like moving around in your swimsuit, then you may want to consider nylon spandex. Polyester spandex fabrics in general tend to be a little bit more matte, meaning like not shiny. And I'll show you some examples in a moment. And then both polyester and nylon, are soft, they're durable. You have to have that spandex in there, to keep them, retaining their shape. That's what pulls them back together. So I'll show you some examples first. These are our polyester spandex swim fabrics. So you're probably not going to be able to see a ton of the difference on the video, but here's one. It's got some good stretch. It's a little bit thinner, which can be nice depending on what you're using it for. I actually really like some of these polyester spandexes for rash guards because I feel like the fabric feels really light and airy on my skin. So there's this one. Okay, so these are the more matte, so less shiny in this polyester. You can see they have great stretch. Here's another example. I think this ice cream one is so cute. Now this is one where you may want to add a lining. You can kind of see my hand a little bit back there. So you see, notice that in a fabric that you're interested in, just keep in mind that you might want to add a lining behind that, especially for an adult. I think this one's so cute, this little boho flower one. So those are our polyester spandex blends. Now I'll show you some of the nylon spandex. So again, these ones tend to be, as I've noticed, a little bit thicker. They're going to be a little bit more slow to dry, but great for water sports. So I just love this splatter paint drop fabric. I've actually used it for swimsuit. This one is really gorgeous as well. Here's another example, and you can see the stretch. To me, they feel like they have more, some of these feel like they have more four-way stretch. I don't have samples of all of the ones that Fabric Fairy carries, so I'm just kind of limited to what I'm showing you here. Here's another good one. Let's see, this one's really fun. And you can see that one definitely needs a little bit of a lining, but not too much. The others did not seem to need much of it. This one is super tropical and floral and fun. So I really like that. And they all vary just a little bit in weight and stretch. So, definitely check the description, check it against your pattern in terms of what you're going to need. I think this one's just beautiful. It's kind of a marbled look. And there you can kind of see. So those are some of the nylon spandex. I also wanted to show you, we have solid swim fabrics, of course. So these are the Kira swim solids. And I absolutely love these. These have held up really well over time for me. And we have them in kind of a variety of colors. So you could do some fun color blocking. I used this bright purple one for my daughter's suit recently. The suit that I shared in the group to share about the SewAlong, the bottoms were made with this kind of army green Kira. So we have those swimsuit solids available. And then Fabric Fairy also carries some shiny swim. So these almost have like I don't know if you can kind of see that, like a glittery texture. So they're great for dance wear. And if you want to take this week to make a dance costume, that's totally okay with me. Kind of goes right along with the whole swimwear theme anyway. So these are a little bit shinier, just kind of fun. And they work great for swim. So if you wanted something with a little bit of a flash, those would be a good option. I love the pink and the teal together. Those have always been some of my favorite colors. And then finally we have some recycled prints. These are called Palm Rec 18, and I just find these to be really amazing quality. So these are some of my favorite swim fabrics on the site. This pink is really fun. I'm gonna do something with this pink soon. And then this is one that I am definitely gonna sew this week. It's got great stretch. I love that it's recycled. I think those might have an SPF rating. I'd have to double check. But I love the colors. They're all pretty opaque, so you don't need to worry about that. So those are some of the swim fabrics that we carry. So I would say, number one, look for the color and the style that you want to enjoy. If you're kind of deciding between two and you have more of, athletic plans for that suit, or you have, you need it to dry really quickly, that's where you can start deciding between nylon and polyester, in my opinion. The other thing to consider is swim lining. So most patterns will have you line a part of the swimsuit, if not all of it. You can always choose to add a lining to a part that's not already lined, and I've done that. The Jalie has some swim bottoms called the Gigi swim bottoms, and the back is not lined in that suit on the bottoms, but I will often line it depending on how opaque my swim fabric is. So my favorite swim linings from the Fabric Fairy are these EcoFit linings. They are kind of drapey, like a really lightweight athletic knit almost. They're really easy to work with. They don't snag at all. You can even unpick stitches from them. The old style of swim lining that I used to use it was really meshy, and it would run, and it was really frustrating to work with. So I highly recommend these EcoFit swim linings. Comes in black, tan, maybe a white too, I believe. The carbon swim lining is also great. There's also the, let me find my notes here. The poly swim lining has a little bit less spandex than this, or a little bit less spandex than this EcoFit lining, and it's a slightly heavier weight, and has a little bit more vertical stretch. So this EcoFit lining only has 35% vertical stretch, so most of the stretch is horizontal. A little bit less vertical, though, I don't think you really super notice it. They've worked great for me. So these are my favorite, but there is that other style if you prefer the other type of poly swim lining. So keep that in mind. There are those two general types. And then the last types of swim fabric that I want to cover right now are the board shorts. So there are two main types of board short fabrics on the website. The first one is called the Flow board short. So this fabric has a lot of drape. You can kind of see it has a lot of drape. It's nice and thin. It's gonna have just a little bit of stretch, maybe like 20% stretch. And we've custom printed these, so there's a lot of fun variety on prints. available. I think there's some good things for both, you know, gender neutral and, you know, more typical male and female type of prints. So I think these are amazing. I made my twins some board shorts that I'll share out of this fabric. It's very lightweight, it dries super fast. I make myself Moxie swim shorts out of them from Greenstyle. So I definitely recommend the Flow board short. That said, we also carry the standard board short, and this is a pair of board shorts that I made my son last year. So these have held up really well over time, and I can tell you that spending so much time, we kind of chase 70 degrees, so we spend a lot of time in our bathing suits, and they wear them daily pretty much, and in the salt water and chlorine in saltwater swimming pools, and so this fabric holds up really well. It doesn't, if you look, I don't know if you can really see, like the butt doesn't pill. You know, they sit on the side of the pool and it like gets all scratched up. This type of swim fabric is kind of a microfiber, dries super fast and really resists that. So I think these might dry a little bit faster than the Flow board short. They're less lightweight. They're, I think, maybe a little hotter to wear, but they are excellent for drying quickly and holding up over time. They don't have any stretch, so make sure that the board short pattern you're using doesn't need stretch if you use these, because there's absolutely zero stretch in these. These are 100% a woven fabric. Now, some people, when they're starting to sew, are more comfortable with wovens, so you know, these could be good for that. I will say that the Flow board short is actually also really good for tank tops or woven dresses or things like that. And either one of these fabrics could be used for like a fun poolside bag or something like that. Okay, so we talked about swim fabrics. Let's move on to notions. In terms of cutting out your swimwear, I 100% recommend a rotary cutter. This is some swimwear can be a little slippery, so what you're gonna wanna do is have some pattern weights handy. I use these washers from Home Depot. Set that down and then use your rotary cutter to cut around your swim fabric. You don't wanna be cutting with scissors the whole pattern, because the fabric's just gonna shift on you. And a lot of times you'll be cutting folded layers. So I do recommend having a pair of scissors on hand, snip little areas, you know, and kind of, you know, just general scissors for thread trimming and such. If you are making a pattern with a zipper, for example, the Jalie Zoe rash guard, which I've made countless times for my daughter, I always use these plastic zippers because they're not going to rust. So I really like these. You could probably use nylon coil, but I always use the plastic, and those work really well for me. Something else to consider with swim is clips. I always use clips. If you're using pins, make sure that you're using ballpoint pins so that they don't put holes in your fabric. But I really prefer to use clips when I'm sewing, and you can find these on Amazon for inexpensive. And then, you know, you want to have some sort of marking device. A lot of times there'll be strap openings or things like that that you need to mark. So you can use like a chalk marker. I will sometimes use a regular pen if it's inside the seam allowance. Seam is my fun fabric fairy pen. Or even, you know, they have like markers that disappear with just a little bit of heat. And those can be useful too. Another thing that I would recommend having on hand is wash away wonder tape. I order this off Amazon, and I use it when I make the Moxie shorts. It's also really helpful when you install your elastic to put a little piece on the end, just to kind of keep that piece in place as you're starting to sew. So I use wash away wonder tape quite a bit when I'm sewing. You want to be basting things, but where you can't baste, you may want to use wash away wonder tape. And then if you don't have, you could use a loop turner, or if you're old school like me, a safety pin. Of course, a seam ripper. Nothing ever goes perfectly the first time. And if it does, please tell me about it, because that's awesome. And then thread. I use, you know, Maxi Lock thread in my serger. I use polyester, you know, usually Gutermann thread in my sewing machine. As far as needles go, I would strongly recommend stretch needles. 7511 is usually a good weight for swimwear. And then if you're using a serger, I use these Oregon needles. It's like ELX 705. That's what I use for my serger. Okay, last but not least, let's talk about elastic. There are two kind of main types of elastic that you can use, well, really three that you'll see in swimwear. The first one, the one that I recommend the highest, is rubber swim elastic. This really holds up well over time in chlorine, salt water, that kind of thing. So I have not seen any, of the rubber swim elastic get stretched out or degraded, and Fabric Fairy carries this. Now, it doesn't come in all the widths. So if you want like 2-inch rubber swim elastic, I have not seen that. I think the largest width Fabric Fairy carries is like 1/4 inch up to 3/4 of an inch. So this has a little bit of a coating on it, which makes it, it doesn't stick to your sewing machine foot the way that you might have experience with other elastics like clear elastic. So I recommend this. I don't recommend clear elastic in swimwear. It does degrade over time. It is thinner. I have used it, but I don't think it's something that could hold up to intense kind of use. Now there is kind of a cotton spandex swimwear elastic that you'll see carried in some big box stores that, it does work. It's not my favorite. It's thicker than the rubber, so the rubber lies a little bit smoother, I feel like. And I find the rubber just as easy to sew with, but if you have the cotton spandex swim elastic and that's what you're used to, that certainly is appropriate for swimwear and will work. Fabric Fairy also carries braided elastic that's designed for swimwear and wider widths. So this is what I'll use as like an under bust band or in a waistband. And this has held up really well over time in my kids' swimsuits. If you look at, my son's shorts, this is the original size. He's worn these for about a year. And he has braided elastic in there. It's meant for swimwear. Braided elastic meant for swimwear. So Fabric Fairy carries that as well. And I recommend that. So hopefully that kind of clarifies the different types of elastic. You'll want a cutting mat, ruler. These are really useful for cutting out straps if you're doing swimwear straps. And then of course your swimsuit patterns. As a part of my blog post, I'm going to be posting an entire list of the swimsuit pattern makers that I'm aware of. The PDF indie patterns, the big four, have tons of swim patterns as well, but I'm not going to list them. So, those are and where I know that they have videos or tutorials, I will link those where I can. I'm open to adding to that list. So if you have ones that are favorites that you don't see on there, let me know and I can add to that list as well. But, just when you look at your swim pattern, take a look. This is an example of one from Jalie. On the back, it's going to say, sizing. You're going to want to measure yourself. Sometimes it'll do a girth. I don't know if you can see that, like a girth measurement to make sure that the shoulder to crotch length is appropriate. So you want to take a look at that as well if you need that. And then, just make sure that you understand, what type of stretch you're going to need. Some swimsuit patterns also want you to have these kind of bra clips for the back. So Fabric Fairy does carry those plastic clips. And I have also put grommets. I don't think my son's, did I put grommets on this one? I did. Metal grommets in. I have a grommet press, and that has held up well. That way the water can drain out. Just make sure you look for little notions like that that might be specific to the type of swim fabric or swim pattern that you're going to be sewing. So hopefully that answers some questions about the types of things you'll need. I'm really excited to sew with you this week. Under today's post, please just comment with what pattern you're planning on using, share what fabric you're planning on using. It's always fun to inspire each other and encourage each other. At the end of the week, we'll be doing a giveaway. So stick around and let's have some fun sewing swim. Thank you.